What's up guys, Roddy here, and today we're going to talk about this guy, the brand new Motorola Razr Plus or Motorola Razr 40, depending on what part of the world you're in. So let's go. So I've had a lot of Motorola phones, the first ever Motorola Razr, and I had all of the modular Motorola Z phones. I love those modular phones, and to this day, some of my most favorite devices I've ever used were those modular phones. I just really loved them. I don't know. And so now I've just been kind of secretly waiting for Motorola to make another device that I could fall in love with. Let's talk about whether or not it was this device, the Razr Plus. So in typical fashion here on the channel, we'll talk about design. So Motorola really went all in on this outer exterior display, as they call it. Yes, I have a matte screen protector on there for various reasons. One, to save the screen from getting scratched to heck and back. But also, it's really shiny, almost like a mirror finish without it. So this helped with the glare. As you can see, it's pretty nice. But Motorola went all in on this outer exterior front display, as I like to call it. I really like it. I like the fact that they're utilizing this panel, that you don't have to flip the phone open as much. You can, basically go through, and not only do you have widgets, but like you can get weather, you can get multiple apps on there, you can send text messages if you want to. Yes, it is smaller, and yes, you do kind of have to play with what you're able to use, like when it comes to typing and things like that. How big you want the keyboard to be, how small you want it to be, etc., etc. But at least they give you the option to kind of customize that for your best case use scenario. So I really like that. I love this hinge. I like that it's really flat, that it doesn't really intrude into the design of the phone. It's very flat. And it seems like to me, like just the way that the casing and all fits around the hinge, and even when you open it up and you barely have a crease, you really can't. I mean, it's hard to tell on camera. There is a crease there, you can kind of see it, but it's so minimal you almost can't even feel that, and you almost can't see it without like some real direct lighting to shine on it. But almost no crease. But yeah, I really love this outer display. I love the inner display. I love this hinge. There's a few things about it that I think are more preference for me that I don't really like about the design. One is it's really this glossy side bezels is really slick. And then also, it's got a really nice matte glass on the back. This frosted glass, it feels really nice, and it has some texture to it, but it's still really, it doesn't have a texture that like helps you hold it. It's still kind of slick. So I would recommend, if you're buying one of these, to know that you probably need to open it with two hands. It's a little difficult, and you're really running a risk of trying to open this with one hand. If you had smaller hands, it would be very easy to hold this like you have here. Outside of that, I pretty much like this phone. I like the design of it. It's very thin. It's easy to hold. It opens up to be a massive screen, which I really like, but it's not super wide like an S23 Ultra would be, or even an iPhone. You can see it's a lot easier to hold in the hand, and like if you're talking on it or if you're texting or holding, it's pretty light, easy to hold. Hand fatigue's not that terrible. So overall design, I would give it a win, other than it being a little slick, and you have to just really be careful. I would say Samsung has a little bit better design, only because they made their sides a little flatter than this. These are still kind of rounded. So I just think that the flatter sides make it a little bit easier to hold, and it's a little more secure in your hand. But next we have to kind of move on from that and talk a little bit about performance and battery life. So I'm talking about battery life first. So out of the box, I got really nervous with this device because the battery life the first 2 days that I owned the Razr was atrocious. It was not good at all. I was hunting for chargers and plugging it in or keeping it on a wireless charger. It was just draining the battery really fast. I know it was doing a lot of setup stuff. I know there was a lot of uploads and downloads and updates for apps and all this kind of stuff that I'm installing and stuff's porting over and et cetera, et cetera. I get that. That's the first day. You kind of, okay, cool. Move on to the second day, you're like, okay, still kind of learning me a little bit, but I mean, it was not like most phones where you can just kind of let it do that and then, you know, go about your normal day, and yes, at the end of the day, you've got to charge it or maybe plug it in and top it off. This phone was going from like 100 to like 50% to like 20% in a matter of like 4 hours. And this is me doing nothing on it. This is me just kind of wanting to leave it alone and let it do its thing. It did also get very, very hot, mostly on this half where the outer display is. So this half where the cameras are and this outer display, this external display, it did get really hot those first few days that I had this device. However, it was really strange. After those 2 first days, the third day, it was like normal. So it was really strange, and to me, that really kind of tells the story here of this device and what I've seen out of performance. It's been inconsistent. I don't really know what is going on with this phone or why it's been so inconsistent with the performance and with the battery life. I can tell you a few days ago I was using it, all I was doing was carrying it around, had my headphones in, streaming service going on, listening to some music, walking around, just not really using the phone a whole lot, just streaming some music. And literally within about 2 hours, it went from completely 100% full to 52%. And I was just like, I'm just streaming music. I'm not doing anything intensive. I'm not using a camera. I'm not getting a ton of notifications. You know, nothing. But then there's been days where I did use the cameras and I did make a lot of phone calls on it, and I'm texting on it and just using it like a normal phone, maybe even a little bit more because I'm pretty much a power user, pretty much using it all day long. And I'd go a full day, and by like 5, 6 o'clock in the evening, it had 64%. And it never warmed up and never got hot or anything like that. And then other days, I noticed it's always, for some reason, something in this section, in where this screen is, it doesn't get hot, it doesn't get uncomfortable, but you can tell it's a little warm. Like right now, it's cool. It's very cool. But there's days where it gets kind of lukewarm. And I don't know why that is. And that's the thing, is like there's something going on where the battery life is inconsistent, performance is the same way. I've had weeks, I've had maybe 1 or 2 weeks out of the 4 where I've had 0 issues, it hasn't gotten warm, everything worked fine, apps worked great, and then I'd turn around and then I'd have 1 or 2 days where it's like, I'm trying to like somebody's post on Twitter and I can't do that. I can't retweet. It's like the buttons don't work. It scrolls, but the buttons don't work. So I have to close the app, open it back up, and then it works. Or I've had issues where I've had scrolling lag, where it's jittery and jumping around and not being super consistent. And then the next day, or maybe just a few minutes later, it works totally fine. I know a lot of people are probably saying, well, you can't blame it on third-party apps, or you can't blame it on the device. Maybe you had a buggy device. Maybe you should reset it, all this kind of stuff. I set this phone up new. I didn't port anything over other than contacts and text messages, and I always do a backup system, and that's all been fine. Texts, calls, just normal phone stuff has been great. It's mostly been around scrolling, battery life, or just laggy in general. And I typically noticed it when I'm trying to multitask on it. Something that typically Androids are really good at. Versus, like with my iPhone, I can usually tell if I've got a bunch of apps open and stuff kind of starts slowing down. I'll just kind of close a bunch of apps and then go into the one that I need. This phone has done that as well. So I'm not really sure what's going on, because this chipset's been in other devices that I've used they all worked great. It's just inconsistent. And that inconsistency then goes over to the cameras. So they're not bad, but there's better cameras out there in this price point, and there's, I would say, better cameras in flipping phones, especially when you throw Samsung in the mix. I get it. I know Samsung does some crazy stuff that not a lot of people like with colors and making it too vivid or whatever, but this phone is definitely giving me more washed out photos. It's giving me less consistency. So there's sometimes where when it hits, it's like, man, that's a really good photo. And then there's other times it's just like, what is the processing even doing? I'll also say too, like in typical Samsung fashion, it's even though it's not a Samsung, the actual preview turns out a lot worse than the actual photo. So what I see in camera, like if I'm taking a picture, you can kind of see that there. If I'm taking a picture in camera, like it looks okay, and then but like when I take it, the processing is so much better than what I'm seeing. So it's one of those things where I kind of have to trust it, like I've had to do with Samsungs in the past. But I don't like it, especially in low light. I see a lot of grain in my photos and stuff like that, and I'll take the picture and then the processing is just like, doesn't over smooth it or anything like that, which is nice, but it's also not even close to being correct. It's almost like it's put a beauty mode on it, and I don't know, it's just strange how weird and wonky the camera systems go from one extreme to the other. Processing is good. I think the hardware is okay, it's usable, but Motorola has a lot of work, in my opinion, on their software experience. It's just not super great to use or as easy as some of the other phones that are out there. And then the processing is just, sometimes it's really good, and then sometimes it's just really fake looking.
This is the main camera using the front lens, or the front screen. Just giving you some shots of how it does with lighting and things like that. Not bad. Not bad stabilization.
I just wish it was a little more consistent. Like if it's going to be bad all the time, just be bad all the time, or if it's going to be okay and decent, I'd rather be okay and decent than being like great, terrible, great, terrible. And it just kind of goes back and forth, and you just left with what you get. But that's really the whole takeaway on the Motorola Razr Plus. It's been an okay device, but it's been very inconsistent. I've even had issues where if I'm using the outer display and I go to the inner display, it's glitched out probably 5 times. Versus if I'm on the inner display, the main display, when it's open, this display, and then I close it down and it switches over to the outer display, I've had 0 issues with that. It's just, it's all in this bundle of inconsistencies. And I think Motorola is really, really close to having a really great device. I think they could kind of tweak and hone the whole design of this just a little bit. Like I wouldn't stray too far away from it. I think they're really, really close. They could just add some things to make it a little bit easier to hold, make the hinge where it, you know, can go in multiple angles so that it doesn't get to a certain point or it gets to a certain point where it's almost closed and closes up. I know you don't use it that much, but it's just nice when you've gotten used to another phone that can do multiple angles if you're watching video or whatever, creating content with it. And that keeps on going. You gotta have the full experience. You've gotta really define how this phone interacts with apps and with heavy demand, and with a phone that can become its own tripod, you need to be able to make sure that you've got a decent set of cameras, but you've also got to make sure your software is doing a really, really good job of handling pictures and videos and colors and focus and all those kind of things that go into cameras. But outside of that, I've been on the fence. Like, do I recommend this device? Is it a good, decent phone? How do I feel about it? Well, I think for everyday use for the average user, if you're not a super heavy power user, I think this is a decent phone. But like a lot of phones that are out there, I don't feel like this phone is worth the asking price for it. The hardware is not quite as premium as some of the other offerings out there that are in this same price point, even in the flipping space. Um, then you get into the inconsistencies with camera, with battery, with just overall performance. It's just kind of like I just don't feel safe recommending a phone that someone could get and the battery not last them all day, and they've got to make sure they're close to a charger 24/7. I don't feel comfortable recommending a device that the cameras are just lackluster and sometimes you get a great photo and sometimes you don't. Or you're interacting with an app and you just have to keep closing stuff and reopening it, starting the phone over, whatever, to make it catch up, resetting the phone because you just keep having all these issues. I don't like to recommend phones that I have those kind of experiences. True, it could have been a bad unit. True, I could do a factory reset and it could be great. However, I like to just open it up and tell you how the phone is out of the box, how it's been for 30 days, because I feel like that's what most people want to know. What it's like to pull it out of the box, turn it on, set it up like a brand new device, and then use it for 30 days. Not have to jump through all these hoops and go, hey, if you have an issue with it, you can do this. And I don't think it's a bad unit. So I'm going to throw that out there. I don't think it's a bad unit because I've had times where it's been flawless and it's been fantastic. But it's been about 60-40 when it comes to good and bad times with the phone. With the cameras, it's been more like 30-70 good to bad, and then the battery life's been about 50-50. So to me, that's just not a phone that hits high enough for me to recommend. I think Motorola's really close. I'm really rooting for them. I hope that they can take this platform, keep it the same, not have to re-innovate things, not have to focus on getting a better outer display or all that kind of stuff. They've got the bones there. They've got the inner workings. Now it's time to get into the refined mode. And I feel like if they keep this platform the same, and if they can refine this at least next year and keep this pretty close and just make it just a little bit better, I think that will be the Razr that everyone's kind of wanted. And then that third iteration, if they don't go off of that, they just refine it just a little bit more, maybe with a better chipset here that's better for thermals and better for performance. I really feel like that they can knock this out of the park. That's been my review of the brand new Motorola Razr Plus. You guys tell me what you think. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. We're on our way to 1,000 subscribers. We're at around 700 right now at the making of this video. Let me know what you think. Do you think this is a good value? Do you think this is a cool phone? Or are you skeptical of it just like I am? Like I said, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Next phone on the list is the brand new Nothing 2 phone. I've got that phone in-house now. Really excited about using the Nothing phone. Never had one of those before, so this should be really, really interesting. And we will see you next time.